Thank you, Corinne. Good afternoon. It is afternoon, everyone. We'll just go get right into it. We always like to start our presentations with our definition of architecture, since that's the beginning and the end of what we do. Architecture is the shaping of space with objects and light to create practical and emotive places. And I'm trying to move ahead here. Am I stuck? Oh, it's still stuck. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about tiny homes and in the tiny home villages as a prototype. I will be talking, Michael Lair, and my partner, Naren Kadrabegovich. We'll be getting into the weeds today because I think these projects are important to discover. We start with the ethos, like why are we doing this and what is so important? Delivery, how do we actually make this happen and how do we make it happen in a timely way? And of course, design. So we know making is the primal act of the architect. Los Angeles, Los Angeles sort of creates a rare. Right now, the homelessness situation here has a rare opportunity to create more complete communities. It remains the unavoidability of sisters and brothers living on our streets that finally has and will continue to command everyone's attention and action at this point versus when we started talking about this in seminars about a year ago, if not longer. Lots of projects are being built or are en route to being built. Different types of housings, shelters, and the like are coming online. Not nearly enough, each perhaps solving a part of the problem, none solving the whole problem. What we understand and appreciate that all of the above and more are what is needed and what is happening. And I'd like to emphasize the critical the that we the larger team, and we may talk a little bit more about it. Lair Architects is the lead architect. We have designed these projects in collaboration with the Bureau of Engineering, led by Gary Lee Moore, but particularly with the design leadership and force of Deborah Weintraub and her colleagues. So, in terms of ethos, once again, we come back to the primal hut. From the untended to homeless on the street to the well homed, we understand shelter as safety, identity, state of mind, importance, power, prestige, accommodation, memory, what was, and prophecy, what might be, aspiration, sanctum, autonomy, agency, and harm reduction. Harm reduction is a really important word to know if you talk about, think about, or act or engage in the world of dealing with the houseless and probably in life in general. The idea of harm reduction as a notion is you meet people where they are at with no judgment. If you're where you're at, I respect you and as a fellow human being. And the big idea is to restore dignity, respect, autonomy, and agency. Another increasingly vivid understanding is that at the end of the day, lived experience, there's no replacement for lived experience. People who have that experience know things that you could not know otherwise. Now, in terms of delivery, there's design and delivery. Delivery is hyper important in this whole tranche of projects. So everybody always wants faster, better, and cheaper. And it's almost impossible to have all three. It might occasionally happen, but it's usually one has to give. So the notion is that in this case, cost and budget are pretty inviolate, and speed. But for us, speed and quality have been prioritized here. So the first project we'll look at in a few minutes was a conventional design bid build. You all, you do draw. We did drawings for the city, and they were put out to bid. A builder was selected, and built the project. The tiny homes villages projects are design build, and design build notionally I think is an ideal way to do it. In fact, it often isn't. It works when you're grounded. It's grounded in trust between the parties, and also from our point of view, it must be design driven. So another critical notion here is the notion that the notion of partnering. So if it's not a legally a de jure partnership, a legal partnership, you have to be acting in partnership, teaming. That we're all on the same side. Client, designer, and builder are all on the same sides, and in fact, we would go so far as say, in lieu of this attitude, excellent outcomes are not possible. And the third notion is triangulating. Who of the parties are you in contact with, regular contact with, to get through blockages, to make sure that things aren't lost capriciously or unnecessarily? Really important. That speaks to being an engaged architect, knowing your city, working with the government, working with communities, and knowing people and keeping your eyes on the prize. So another thing is to it, these are architectural truisms, life truisms. Risk taking is important, and calculated risk. Know what risk, take risks you can, and be careful about dangerous risks. And the idea that with risk pacing, no risk, no pain, and if there's no pain, there's probably no gain. And the other idea is rainmaking, that as an architect with calculated risks, we also have to help be rainmakers. We can't just wait for other people to make things happen. If you want something to happen, you have to be proactive, calling the partners and other players you know. So in this regard, the Tiny Homes project, the first one that we'll be focusing on, we understand it as a beta project. In other words, it was the first such project in LA. And the thing is that to lay people, whether something is experimental or testing is irrelevant, but it's important to remember that we are going to test things, we're going to do some things wrong and some things right, we're going to learn lessons so that the next project is better. Big ideas here, and it's just the essence of why architecture matters. Good news matters. We illuminating problems, correcting problems are important, but it's important to know when good news, whether a public agency is leading a design effort or a good outcome or projects that make a difference, is important in the public imagination. Impact matters. How do you do things that capture people's imaginations and change the game? So we think for these projects, there is the audience. The first audience are the clients and guests, those people who have lived on the street and are now being housed in these transitional shelters, the staff who works there. The next critical audience is the neighborhood. The larger, maybe ultimately most important audience is the city, and the city and the culture. How do you change the culture? How do you get people to think about things differently? In other words, how can architecture and placemaking destigmatize, whether it's both the notion of having a shelter and destigmatize the populations that are looked down upon and looked through, as opposed to looked at directly and embraced? And in that regard, as architects and designers, we think it's important to make communities and places of desire. This is a nice place. I am proud to be associated with it, to be, whether it's as a taxpayer or to be a neighbor of it. And I'm pleased to be part of a community that takes care of its least well-off sisters and brothers. So impact and good news. The notion there is storytelling. Here's a project we actually did a seminar on about a year ago. These starter homes, 4 years after we designed them, last fall, they were well covered in Dwell magazine. The most interesting point is that those prototypes become interesting if they're spread to the culture. The projects we're talking about today have somehow captured the imagination of folks around the world. In the last few months, there have been dozens and dozens of our articles, sort of many times a week. in many languages and many alphabets that are not legible. And there's no downside to this. The upside is understanding what it takes to capture the imagination. So let's move on to this notion, just to place these projects in context, the continuum of housing from the from the untended to people on the street, people who have their tents on the street, there's no bathrooms and no facilities. That's really remains probably our very biggest challenge in Los Angeles. Then there's the tended to people on the street. Here's the downtown drop-in center we did 21 years ago, 3 million visits over 13 years. You could come and shower, watch TV, launder your clothes, and then go back to the street and maybe eventually meet with a caseworker. Um, Today, there's the Refresh Spot downtown, which serves a similar purpose for people living on the street. Um, Another project in that vein, again, 20 years ago, still going strong, the Jane Woods Community Center, both on San Julian Street. These are for people who live on the street, but also for the folks who live in the SROs, classes, maybe one meal a day, and Narcanon and the like. So what we are talking about today is transitional shelter, and understand that transitional shelter is not housing. It is transitional shelter from being unhoused to being housed. The first project we did a year ago for the city as part of their Bridge Homes projects was the Etna Street Shelter. This is in the Valley, in Van Nuys, North Hollywood, and these were with pre-made buildings, pre-made units that were made in Riverside and shipped in. And this is dorm style. So you have here 70 people in, these are essentially like cubicles up to 4 or 5 feet high, giving privacy and some storage. The work here, as with all of these projects, is to create, this is an aerial view, to create a coherent campus, and then to create a real sense of community. The urbanism of these places is hyper important to us, a sense of specialness. The ground plane is a hyper important thing for us because it's the most cost effective way to transform something from putting a thing on an asphalt ground to making an honorific place. And even here on the aluminum decking, connecting the units, and we use color to take these not so special mobile units and making them quite special. And then at this point, we had umbrellas dedicated or donated. Subsequently, they became part of the repertoire of the developments. And here's the bathing room, and here's the place. And then here I will pass this off now to my partner, who is also principal in charge for these these tiny home villages. I'm going to stop sharing there, and we'll take it over.
Okay, let's see if we can make a smooth transition.
And while you're doing that, I'll just mention that in-house, our team is Naren and myself and Eric Alden, Ashley Favre, and Edin Kaderbegovich. And then in one way or another, many of the people have been involved in the projects. And then publicly, our client is the Bureau of Engineering. Again, Gary Lee Moore, and the real amazing spiritual and, in fact, leadership and making things happen with our colleague Deborah Weintraub, and really a group of incredibly, Maria Quinones, incredibly dedicated professionals, many of whom are architects. And then our another our builder is a critical player in making these happen, Ford Construction. Uh, and actually, we have several other consultants, and we should mention them. But I would say one important one. we came to realize the civil engineer is as important as any consultant on this team, because even when the unit costs are not expensive, the site work ends up being really the driver of the cost of the project. Okay.
That's right. Okay, so I'm going to go back for a quick second to the Etna project. And let's see, just to mention a couple of things that I think have relevance to the subsequent projects. So one of the things that we didn't talk about was the incredible speed with even this project, which was completed. I think that when we were first tasked with the project, we just sort of looked at each other and said, well, do we really want to, can we afford to do this? Can we, because the speed at which it had to be delivered, and this was traditional delivery, design, bid, build, was extraordinary. But we were fortunate that this was one of the last projects in the series of Rich Homes, and there were already a series of relationships established at the building and safety that enabled us to still working very closely with the plan checkers, were enabled us to finish the job and permit it in time. So the components of a shelter, like a bridge home like this, are, as Michael said, in this case, it was a dormitory style housing, which was made out of 20 stitched trailers to create this large place. The hygiene trailer, which is located down here, and this was the administration trailer, which was located here at the entry. And then so these are all state approved components, which means that they are approved before they are delivered on site. So that doesn't constitute a significant part of the plan check process. But the only thing that had to be structurally engineered by us was the canopy, which you saw in some of the images that had to be engineered and approved. Another component which was critical in setting the scene for the tiny home villages was, you can see all of these ramps. All of this is elevated off of the ground plane. So there's a sort of a disconnect between the living space and the actual ground plane. Subsequently, it was decided that we utilize prefabricated, already used containers that would be level with the ground. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But the most critical, I think, relationship that came out of this was how well we worked with the general contractor who we met on this job and who bid it out competitively. But we developed a really excellent partnership, and that was they've actually approached us when the tiny home village projects came about. They were the ones that actually approached us to team for the design, build, delivery system.
I'll also just to say that the pressure on everybody was astonishing, and starting with the mayor, who was facing public pressure, and every notch down from the mayor came with multiplied, pressure and worry, and sort of dealing with that. And I would say, sort of, whether it was city agencies or ourselves, everybody sort of had to deal with that and keep, and keep hyper focused at the same time.
Once you sign the contract and you are, as an architect, essentially responsible for delivering that contract, we take that obviously very seriously. And I think for the Etna project, we had about 4 weeks to obtain the ready-to-issue permit for construction, which was then to be bid out to the contractors. And 4 weeks, and if you've done any work in the city of Los Angeles with the building and safety, that's an impossibility. But there were protocols in place that enabled us to move quickly. Even with that, it was still, I found myself on a phone with the city attorney trying to chase down a lease agreement between Metro and the city to make sure that we can actually place the shelter there. But that's just, all in a day's work. Anyway, so going back to the tiny homes. So what is a tiny home? So this is In this case, the tiny home villages are in fact comprised of 60-foot square foot shelters, 60-foot square foot shelters, which are produced by a pallet shelter company out of Everett in Washington. They are incredibly fast to assemble. It takes about an hour to assemble one of these shelters. They are very affordable. I think they start at $5,000, but you can add additional things to them to enhance them, such as the air conditioning and heaters, which all and sort of some interior furnishings, which all of our shelters have. And they come delivered on a pallet. Again, come up very quickly. So what we often talk about is that what this company has done is really sort of capture the sweet spot in between permanent housing and a tent, and has sort of, even the way that it looks, we often talked about it as sort of monopoly houses, or a child's drawing of a house. So it's like, it goes back to that sort of primal hut that Michael was talking about earlier. So this is sort of a cutaway look, again, from their website. And they ask on their website, well, where's the bathroom? So this is explicitly a shelter. As Michael said earlier, this is transitional housing. This is not permanent. This is not a permanent home. So the bathrooms are actually done in the communal style. So this is more of a camp. But you can see, if you look inside, 8 feet by 8 feet, 2 folding beds, space for 2 folding beds. And during COVID times, all of these are occupied by a single person. Other components, you have some storage space underneath the bed. You have shelving in the back wall, and then the critical components are the air conditioner at the top and the heater. The shelf can also double as a desk. These are pictures of some of our units that are already completed and furnished, and they also make a slightly larger unit, which is about 100 square feet, which leaves a little bit more maneuvering room inside. And we have implemented these not necessarily for habitation, but for storage in some of our projects. So I talked about a little bit about the speed at which 4 weeks to get the permit, which we thought was almost impossible to get, but we were able to handle it. In this case, as a design build team, we were tasked with designing the project, permitting the project, and building the project in 13 weeks. And so when we were first told about this, after a little bit of hesitation, okay, well, let's bring it on. Let's see what we can. Let's see if we can do this. And really, honestly, the only way this is made possible is that the City of Los Angeles, particularly Bureau of Engineering, Architectural Division, has done extraordinary amount of work in vetting a lot of the issues with the jurisdictional agencies having jurisdiction, such as the fire department and building and safety, and many others. So they have put in an extraordinary amount of work, because this is nothing like this has been done in the City of Los Angeles before. So the whole thing was an invention, a beta project. So agencies didn't quite know what to do with it, and without that sort of groundwork ahead of time, this would not have been possible. So this is an excerpt actually from the bridging documents that the Bureau of Engineering prepared and gave us, which had information on site plans, on some of the structural details and connections that were pre-approved with the building and safety, some idea of grading, and then electrical requirements. But this is sort of this is the site straight from the bridging documents. You can see up here in the corner, if you can see my mouse, the site selection plays an extraordinary amount it's an extraordinary amount of work, and it's really important in terms of availability of infrastructure, its location to other amenities, what the ultimate costs are going to be, and ultimate success of the site. And the council district and the Bureau of Engineering, and they have to do a significant amount of work with the local neighborhoods and also identifying, and local agencies identifying pieces of land. So the Chandler Tiny Home Village is located between a orange metro bus line on the north here, and then Chandler Boulevard, which is a one-story street, one-story road. I'm sorry, one-way road heading south in this direction here. Quite busy, and then across the road is a fairly large park. And the site, as you can see, it looks like it's flat, but it actually had quite a bit of grade. This is verbatim the page from the Bureau of Engineering's bridging document. So they had already looked at a potential layout for the site, filling the. So let me just talk about again, some of the components that I mentioned before are found here. So the first and the most important one are the housing units, which you see spread out through the site. There is the administration trailer, which is located here in the corner, and that has a couple of offices. It has a bathroom for the staff, and it has a laundry room that services the entire village. Another component, which is the bathroom, also really important, is it's a mobile hygiene trailer that has a deployable ramp that unfolds and gives access to the folks with disabilities. And this is actually an important component because it determines the capacity of the site. Each one of those trailers with 5 bathrooms, one of them which is accessible, has the capacity to serve 75 tenants. Then we also have a pet area in here, and we have sort of eating areas kind of spread out throughout. The entries here, also significant contributor to the cost, is the fire department's requirement to have a fully accessible 20-foot wide fire lane throughout the entire site. This really wasn't clear to us why that was necessary, because the site's barely 100 feet deep at the deepest end. But that was the requirement. It was negotiated. We didn't have time to question many of these predetermined decisions. As Michael said, faster, better, cheaper. You can't have all three. Something's got to give. So we took a lot of the work that was done as a starting point, and did not have the time to question it.
Yeah, I think that this as just as a single idea really exemplifies. It's like, yeah, if you want to lose 2 months or 3 months to figure out, work with the fire department to do that, you could save a bunch of money, and you'd be finished. You'd begin construction 3 or 4 months after otherwise the project will open. Those are real issues and really important to understand and to explain.
So some of the this is also straight out of the bridging documents, axonometric view. So just to sort of show you the basic orientation, the entry was here. That was the guard shack coming through. There's a few parking spaces off of the fire lane. The fire lane comes through and exits out this way. The administration trailer was located in the back. There was a storage trailer, 100-foot pallet shelter, and then the hygiene trailer is over here. And obviously the rest of the units were sort of scattered throughout the site. So the Bureau of Engineering did all of this work, but then again, they also have clients. Their clients are the council district, in this case, LAHSA, Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, which and agents flow information between various city agencies is sporadic. So sometimes you get, as architects, you get information later than necessary, but they didn't have the time to modify it. So when we received this, they basically told us, okay, well, this is it, but the administration trailer actually has to be in the front, and some of the other requirements. We started design and started scrambling, and then LAHSA came in later and said that each one of these would have to require a storage container, which has to be located in on the site, and that area is as large as this entire here dog run. So when you're fighting for inches, everything matters. So to get that kind of information late in the games is quite challenging.
And by
Also,
the way, late in the game is in this game, late in the game can be like days late,
so
as opposed
we
to in a normal project, you could, wait weeks or months.
so we had designed the site, redesigned the site, and then told that information had to redo the whole thing all over again. Also, really important, which makes things even more challenging, is that in working with the fire department, Bureau of Engineering has set certain requirements for these units, or fire department has set them, that each unit has to be 6 feet apart in all directions from the neighboring unit. They can't, if they face each other, they have to be 14 feet apart. So that's why we stagger the doors. Each relationship, the way they're located, has its own requirements. So I call them a little force field that you can't penetrate as you lay them out on the site. To make things more interesting, the administration trailer has a 20-foot wide force field. The storage building has a 20-foot wide force field. So all of these components. So if, for example, so if you take that administration trailer, simply put it in the front, everything else has to shift 20 feet away, which obviously affects the layout of everything else. And there was also a setback here on the side of the building, 10-foot setback, and you couldn't place any buildings in. And also the parking area here was located. We had to be moved because it was located in such a way that if the admin was there, it didn't really work. In addition to all of that site planning work, these were the drawings that were part of our set that described the pallet shelter. And you have to understand that we did not see the pallet shelter in person. We didn't know, we couldn't feel the material. These drawings were all we had. And once we actually looked at the drawings very closely, we realized they're not that descriptive. They don't describe the relationships because of solving for accessibility and solving for transitions between units is really important. We ended up having to have a Zoom call with the factory in Washington, where he took a tape measure to the threshold so we could actually design it properly. In addition to all of those issues, BOE also negotiated with Department of Building and Safety sets of conditions for foundation work. So in this case, and God bless them, our LADBS is very conservative. So in this case, if we were to put this is a foundation drawing, if we were to put it on existing asphalt or existing concrete, we had to drill 1 foot wide concrete caissons every 2 feet apart to put it under which is just, it's very safe, but it seems to be overkill given the situation. In other case, they allowed us to pour a concrete slab on grade, and then place the unit on top of it. This is the sheet describing the hygiene trailer. We had also not seen, this was also very much in flux. You can see the deployable ramp there and what that looked like.
I would say that, just to put a finer point on it, given the extremely fast schedule, we were desperate to get information. We had to move ahead to complete our drawings without actually, we were looking like, where can we see these units to understand what we have to do from them? Right. They were, that was, that sort of kind of freaking out and being desperate on one hand, but keeping moving ahead and being as ingenious as possible to try to figure out what were these things actually.
So once we understood all of those conditions, then we set to redesign. This is all happening in real time. We're playing around, we're moving, but the key discovery here was that using that 10-foot setback for the driveway, because you can't really you can't put a building there, but you can actually drive on it. So by doing that, we were able to buy 10 feet of the fattest part of the site, and we're like, wow, 10 feet, that's just incredible. And it opened up a number of other things. And then we did a number of studies, not only color, but each one of these is driven by specific site conditions that we'll talk about a little bit more. dealing with, lowering the site by 1 inch or making it 1 inch results in 100 cubic yards of export. And so countless calls with the engineer, with the civil engineer, Barbara Hall and our contractor and us, just trying to see, to navigate, to find that sweet spot of where the export would actually match the bridging documents and still solve for all the other conditions. And this is a drawing that's sort of equivalent to the initial drawing I showed you, but you can see that actually, and here's Michael showing it. On the left here, you have the bridging document, and you can see that it's slightly shorter than all the other drawings. And we, at the end, we basically, during the process, we said, well, is this all to the site? Is there anything else? Well, they said there's a little bit more to the north. So we actually used that little tip to be able to put the storage and
Storage
the storage bins in that location. And so with the design in place, we were able to, and this took an extraordinary amount of also risk, when we felt with the contractor that there was a negotiation, and the city takes a couple of weeks to sort of process the notice to proceed, to give us the official notice to proceed with construction. So we took, as Michael talked about, a little bit of risk with the contractor, and before we had the official contract, before we had the notice to proceed, we did a design, and we were able to actually permit working closely with LADBS to permit the project the day we got the permit, the day we got the NTP. So day one, we were able to hit the ground running, and we had the machines on site starting to grade the
right. So calculated risk taking and rainmaking, and the upside was meeting, first of all, meeting, if not beating the schedule, and also relieving a little bit of pressure, because had we lost sort of days or probably weeks later on, everything else would have just been harder and harder.
All right, so we had the equipment on site working, and this is a really beautiful problem. I don't think if somebody told me that I would linger on this slide and I would show a slide like this, I would tell them they were crazy. But this turned out to be a significant challenge. This is a portion of the street that had to be taken away because the way the site was located, there was no sidewalk next to it, and therefore a person in a wheelchair could not access the site. So we had to go back 300 feet and modify the street 300 feet to the closest sidewalk to cut the street back, pour new asphalt with a 2% cross slope to satisfy ADA, while maintaining the existing drainage of the street, which was quite a challenge. And this, of course, that's the gutter that maintains the existing drainage of the street. But then we had to get from here to the curb, which also required quite a bit of invention, which we eventually solved. But that problem actually occupied so much of our brain space at the time.
And this was in lieu, we were not allowed to put a crosswalk just directly across the street to an existing sidewalk, and the precise location of the entrance on Chandler at that point in the curve, the cars are speeding around the curve. It's a long stretch without any interruption, so cars are going very fast, and it is a little treacherous.
So in addition to that modification of the street, we had to place K-rails the entire length of the way from the sidewalk to the entrance to protect the pedestrians from the cars. So, and in addition to that, the sewer line, the closest sewer line to the site was located 600 feet at the nearest street. So all of these things add up and collectively contribute to the cost of the construction. And again, the city has really thought this through. This is City of Los Angeles. This is not, city has significant experience with lawsuits, and so they've really taken the time to vet these things and make sure that they're done right. So that because, let's say we build this in 5 days, in 6 months, nobody's going to remember that we did it in 5 days. All they're going to remember are like, well, this doesn't work or this doesn't work, and you're exposing yourself to a significant amount of risk as a public agency. Again, here you see construction is moving along. We already have the pads for the rebar with the rebar in them for to set the units. This is from a different project. This is from Alexandria, but I just wanted to show how the pallet shelters arrive on the pallet and are quickly then taken apart and put together in about an hour each. This is a construction shot of the foundations for the administration trailer. Oh, one of the critical ways we were able to gain space is we decided to take one of the storage units, which also required that 20-foot radius, and convert that and stitch it on to a shipping container and stitch it to the existing shipping container to eliminate a whole 20-foot requirement. So we bought a lot of space for that with that idea. And this is the foundations for it, which these containers are set in the ground. So this is the access space for all the plumbing and everything else down below it.
The foundations are, as you can see, on site. Virtually everything else is prefab and brought in.
Again, shot of the without prior to any of the color being put in. The site is graded. The guard shack is in. The hygiene trailer is shown up. Finally, we can see what it looks like in person. And then in the midst of all of that, there's an LA Times article that came out right about as we were finishing the project. That sort of painted a picture that wasn't necessarily complementary to the process. And here we are breaking our backs, trying to make this thing happen. Us, our clients, the contractor, our consultants, and so this comes out not necessarily portraying a full picture of the process and the amount of time that the city actually took to vet all of these issues and make sure that it can be completed prior to us even getting the contract to get the project.
I mean, it's a challenge that, I think we all face as architects, particularly anything that relates to infrastructure. It just takes a long time, and there are a lot of expenses that are not intuitive. I think in Doug Smith's article, and it had nothing, it really preceded design. It had nothing to do with the design of the project. Doug was focusing on, the raw costs, and even the costs can be diced and sliced so many ways. What it lacked was any contextualization of both what was the larger problem being solved, what was the nature of taking a useless site and adding value to it. And the biggest thing was there was zero understanding of the fact that this was a beta project, that something, these types of homes had never been done in Los Angeles. So there was no real understanding until this project of how this project worked vis-a-vis the regulations of Los Angeles. This was but it was a really good thing. The timing of it turned out to be really good because it affected the way we thought about how we framed the project. In fact, understanding it as a beta project was an important part of the story.
So for comparison's sake, he compared it to a shelter in Riverside, which was done for significantly less, but the comparison wasn't exactly on point because this is the photograph of the shelter in Riverside, and the amenities that this shelter has it does not have the same types of things that we were providing for our clients. In addition, so that actually changed the perception also, and I think that the building and safety, BOE, and work with building and safety to alleviate some of the constraints on the foundations. And this is actually a project that is opening, I think, within the next week or so in Echo Park that we're working on. And here we're using the existing asphalt, which you can see the cuts in here for utilities, but we're placing them on these wood sleepers. And not using concrete foundation. So it did push the building and safety to alleviate some of
Well,
those.
remember, this is now what's held down with a handful of bolts. Originally, the thought was to have nine, 9 piles for each of these 8 foot by 8 foot uh, floors.
So and all of that, I think then, there was also some talk about removal of colors from our project, which were integral. I mean, if you don't have the color doesn't add any cost. In terms of the asphalt had to be sealed, and actually color did add a minimal amount of per square foot of cost for that. And so there was some talk of removal, but Bureau of Engineering and in particular, the lead of the architectural division, Deborah Weintraub, was instrumental in she understood that and the importance of having the color in placemaking and making a place of dignity for our clients, and we were able to actually get it back into design. I'm going to go quickly through some of these. We did numerous color studies, again, shaping arrival, shaping certain parts of the places that had significance on the campus. And the way we think about these things is that the fire lane is the fire lane, but it doesn't really read like a fire lane. It's open space. If it ever gets used as a fire lane, okay, that's great. But most of the time, it actually serves as open space. And this is some of the shots of the completed project, where you can see how we've used color to create basically neighborhoods within the larger village. And here you can see how the umbrellas migrate onto the fire lane and create all of this now is perceived, as opposed to the space really feeling like a road. It feels like a city center. And
it allows you to recalibrate space. We happen to be very focused on the power of the ground plane, which occupies you can see in this case, over 70% of what the eye sees, and then keep carrying vertical surfaces into horizontal surfaces to change space. And the other thing, these projects are really wonderful opportunities to really play on the musicality of housing and community. I mean, sort of using color to really make vivid sort of larger urban ideas. In this case, well, you can go on here in Alexandria.
So that with the success of the Chandler project, and Michael talked about the press that around the world that we received, that was really a test. And I know I'm coming up on 5 more minutes, but I'm going to go really quickly. This site was a full massive deployment of about 100 units, that 103 for 200 tenants. Again, same sort of strategies, but here we had a little bit more. It was set in an existing park, so one of the challenges was to work around the existing trees, which actually created really beautiful little neighborhoods within off of the main sort of public fire lane boulevard. And we didn't have a budget to paint the entire street, but so we were again trying to be very selective about what parts of the asphalt to paint and to animate the main boulevard, and then sort of the individual neighborhoods throughout. And being that it is in a park, we worked very hard to preserve as much permeable surfaces as we can. We used decomposed granite and pea gravel, again, to play to the musicality of housing. And in the end, Carolina Miranda from LA Times visited the site with us, sat in one of the beds, and wrote quite a positive story about all of the efforts that we've had over the various months. So, Michael, you want to wrap up?
Yeah, just in terms of when we began with talking about the continuum of housing, we're also working on permanent housing. We're doing a whole slew of projects with micro units. These are about 300 square foot units. If only the city agencies were capable working even a little bit faster on these. These are pretty much business as usual, which is very, 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 very long-winded. But these are permanent, and each of these projects inform the other. These are just a handful of shots from the Echo Park project on Alvarado, basically it's ready, it's finished, and there you can see very different, a square site. So the other sites, they're long, narrow composition, sort of embedded, sort of the urban form. Here, square site, sort of a very dense grid fitting it all in, and then just using color and shaping, the stairs necessary to create, a sense of urban identity and place and joy and delight for the people here and for the neighbors and for the city at large.
What's really encouraging is that our partners in terms of paint suppliers and this company Street Bond, who has been so forthcoming, they're actually given us a discount on the color so that we can use more in the designs. They all understand that it's all for a good cause, and they're all willing to contribute. So from the general contractors, subcontractors, and the paint suppliers, and we're all sort of in it together, and we're all sort of contributing to the greater cause.
Yeah.
The last shot.
And I will say that this is serious business here. There's nothing light or lighthearted about this. Working as architects, sort of value getting a maximum bang for the buck, and that the impact of these, that there be a sense of delight and joy and pride and dignification of our larger society and of the people here. So really being very empathic about someone coming to a place and feeling, oh, this is special for me. That's good. I am regarded as worthy of specialist, as is every human being. So very privileged projects to work on, as I think that everybody who works on kind of feels. I think that's it.
That's it.